Well, now we want to move into the Sahel region of Africa, particularly Niger, which is one of the three members of the Alliance of Sahel States, along with Mali and Burkina Faso, that have been drawing the attention of the world after they've kicked out French soldiers in all three, and in the context of Niger, also kicked out the American base and troops, which is, very rare in this day and age. And there's a lot of people wondering what's been going on with these popular uprisings, the military governments that have come from them, the kicking out of the various troops. So we are very honored to talk more about Niger by Alex Anfruns Millán, who's a journalist, a political analyst, and the author of the new book, Niger, Just Another Coup or a Pan-African Revolution, which I have to say is a great text. I really enjoyed it. Easy to read from 1804 Books, 1804books.com. Alex, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Eugene. It's a pleasure.
The pleasure is all ours, and a lot we could get into here. And so this may be the first of a couple conversations, but let's start here. One of the things I think is important is, with the Niger and the Sahel more broadly, giving people some context about what they're seeing here with the mass protests, the popular uprisings, the new governments, like what's really driving them. And I wonder if you could give us some context about that in terms of poverty and other issues that really led people to rise up in such a profound way.
Well, extreme poverty has characterized the Sahel for the last decades. Especially about every 2 decades, there has been a famine crisis in Niger. However, there is a blatant contradiction between the situation where the extreme poverty has prevailed and the exploitation of the fabulous resources that under the soil, and like uranium in the case of Niger. The exploitation of the uranium started in 1971 by a unique French company, Areva, which was a monopoly. This company had got extremely wealthy, while Niger had become one of the less developed countries in the world, according to the United Nations Programme for Human Development. So we should take both elements into consideration. We cannot take them separately. Just before the Coup D'État happened, at the end of July 2023, the extreme poverty had reached 42% of the Nigerian population. And that was under Bazoum's presidency, who was considered as a democratic government. And I wonder what kind of regime left behind half of the population and still pretend to be a democracy. There was a complicity and there was a culpability amongst many of those actors. The extreme poverty manifests in the lack of job opportunities, lack of education, access to electricity, healthcare, and so on. But besides all of these problems that the population was already facing, we should add the rise of terrorism. When young people cannot make a living and have a future with dignity, some of them become a prey of the armed groups that eventually use the religion as a pretext. So that was the case in Niger, but also in Burkina Faso and Mali. And definitely the poverty, but also corruption-based system has fueled the problems. And the consequence of that, the military took the power in order to reverse the situation.
I'm really glad that you raised that issue, because so much of the conversation in the West, when Niger and Mali and Burkina Faso were kicking out the French troops, in the case of Niger, kicking out the U.S. troops, the drone base and everything, the focus was on terrorism and how these countries were, now going to basically collapse under terrorism because these Western armies have been playing such an important role. And I wonder how you think about that. I know there's been a lot of sort of criticism of the role of these foreign forces in the Sahel. I mean, were they really there to fight terrorism, or is it more of what I heard, certainly when I was recently in Niger, that the real purpose of these forces was to control the countries?
I think this is a speech that must be heard. Actually, on this point, the Malian government made a formal accusation against France that was addressed to the United Nations Security Council. It says that France had been fueling this phenomenon of terrorism instead of fighting against it. It's a strong accusation, and it deserves an investigation that still has to be made. In fact, this accusation is based on a contradiction. Since France's military intervention in Mali, 2012, the French military strategy has proven to be a failure. It has been admitted by the Major Chief of the French army, who said that they must stay in the Sahel at least for 30 years more, which means until the year 2050. Of course, the African military officers in the Sahel have been confronted with the harsh reality of war on the ground. And that means also the lack of proper equipment, nor the modern weaponry that would have permitted them to defeat the terrorist groups. But it was denied to them by French army. And consequently, it became an occupier in the view of the African officers like Assimi Goïta and Ibrahim Traoré. They asked themselves, how come one of the most modern armies is not able to defeat those terrorist groups? So they came to power after having concluded that the French strategy was unsuccessful. And not only that, they have also concluded that instead of helping them to defeat the terrorists, the Western armies have been supporting both sides in order to justify the presence of Western companies in the Sahel, especially when the Chinese started to have a bigger influence since the beginning of the 2000s. Of course, the reason is that there are fabulous economic interests in the Sahel. So there is a strong suspicion about the role of Western armies that must be taken into consideration. It deserves an investigation, not made by Western nor UN observers, but by an African mission in order to reinforce and defend its sovereignty. So I would say that the real challenge is helping to defend the Sahel states against its enemies by finding the truth. It is vital for them to express clearly their views and to condemn the Western interference. I want to read a document.
Please.
It is a letter addressed to the United Nations Security Council, signed by Abdoulaye Diop, which is the foreign minister of Mali. Just a part of it. The government of Mali has several pieces of evidence indicating that France has made use of those flagrant violations of Malian airspace to collect intelligence for the benefit of terrorist groups operating in the Sahel and to drop arms and ammunition to them. So for me, it's clear.
No, I think that's critically important and something I hope to see investigated more. It has to be heard and not dismissed as a conspiracy theory. One thing that you were certainly referencing, and I think we've all seen, I mean, in Niger, all the countries of the Alliance of Sahel States, which I think it's also worth noting are also very young countries, the desire for more development is very clear. So I wonder what analysis you make here. I mean, it's still the early stages of all of these governments, but in the, for brief period we've had so far, what analysis you would make of the progress made by Niger and other countries on addressing some of these development issues that have been neglected by past governments?
Actually, I defend the idea that there is a Pan-African revolution, and the facts are confirming my writings. For me, definitely, the CNSP authorities in Niger have been taking important steps in order to help the population. They share the idea that it is thanks to the people that today we are seeing a new dynamics in the Sahel, not only in Niger. So the changes don't come from the top, they come from below. First, people have been demonstrating its support to the CNSP authorities under the threat of a war. Secondly, because of the blockade, people have been living many months without the most basic needs like food and electricity. Finally, thanks to the African solidarity and the creation of the Alliance of the Sahel States, there was truck corridors coming from Burkina Faso that helped the Nigerian people. That's how Niger have overcome those difficulties when the Coup D'État happened, and there were many hostilities against it. So, in response to that, the CNSP authorities have understood that there is the people that has to continue playing the main role in the upcoming days. I will quote a remarkable speech that has been pronounced by President Tiani, which essentially says that the people must finally benefit from Niger's national resources. And this has been repeated many times by the CNSP authorities. Since the coup, it's becoming usual to see different measures taken by the CNSP in order to help Nigerian people, especially the medical measures. And as you may know, there is a lack of health centers and facilities in many African countries. Most of the existing structures are private. Then, most of the time, people don't have enough money to cover basic medical needs. Now, the CNSP have reduced to half the price many health services. And for the first time, thousands of people can get access to healthcare. So these actions are being taken to dignify people, especially people without a regular job and families that are lacking resources. Now, the CNSP are not only helping people on a material level, but also on an intellectual one. They are currently raising awareness on the real causes that lies behind the problems of underdevelopment. CNSP is now helping historians to rewrite African history, because until now, only old French colonial power was able to put its version of history into people's mind. So in many aspects, there is a complete reversal of the situation in the Sahel. And to me, popular education is key in the current phase of the revolution.
You know, I'm glad you raised the issue of Pan-African revolution, because I think, you know, a lot of the discussion around the Alliance of Sahel States, in the West at least, is sort of about Russia and, you know, the Niger, Mali, whoever, are just portrayed as subjects, you know, like they are the Russia's, they're being puppeteered by Russia or China or whoever it may be. But I wonder if in this context of multipolarity that everyone's talking about, we should start to see the Alliance of Sahel States as a pole in and of itself, as an African pole that's emerging and offering its own contributions to the overall sort of world situation.
In my view, the Sahel Pan-African revolution is defying the capitalist system. As Samir Amin explained very well, in creating a bloc of African countries that changes the situation, because these are economies that are specializing in sending raw materials to abroad, and this is not a system that can stand anymore. I think we talked about multipolarity. It is a fact that it has been changing the face of the world in the last years. And I would say that this is a new Cold War situation, with NATO having a key role in the destabilization of the South. NATO is seeking to attack multipolarity. NATO's aim is to rule the world, impeding countries like China to become serious competitors vis-à-vis the US empire. NATO's strategy is designed to avoid that, no matter how much chaos is being spread in the meantime. So definitely, multipolarity has got stronger after the creation of the Confederation of Sahel States. And we can see it now. Senegal and Chad governments are also saying that they will send the French army back home. As we can see, dynamics of the Sahel state is just at the beginning. It's an upheaval, considering the situation that has prevailed since the African independence in the 60s decade. Niger government established new partnerships with countries like Iran, Turkey, Russia, or China in the beginning of this year. And it was a decisive step that permitted to defeat the strategy of ECOWAS, based on a blockade and cruel illegal sanctions against the Nigerian people. So it is vital to reinforce this counter-hegemonic bloc of African countries against the imperialist powers. It allows millions of people across the African continent to expect a better future for their children. Of course, there is to be expected that France and other Western countries will try to attempt against the stability and sovereignty of the Sahel states. I want to conclude by this idea. The Confederation of the Sahel States are good news for people's struggles in the global South, because they are seeking for a true development. But it deserves also to be known in the North. José Martí, a guerrilla fighter against the Spanish colonialism, said, "People must know each other as if they were starting to fight a battle together." For me, this is so important. We have to know the history of Niger and the Sahel, because we have a lot in common. It is a common fight against capitalism, against neocolonialism and imperialism. So for me, it's very good news.
Well, it's very good news for us that you wrote about it, and a fantastic book that you were able to write there, Alex. The Niger, Just Another Coup or a Pan-African Revolution. You can get it from 1804books.com. I'd tell you it's a short book. It's easily written. Anyone can read it, but it's filled with facts. If you're interested in Niger, the Sahel, you have to read it. Alex, thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
It's my pleasure. Thanks.